Entertainment, but we also have a team of some of the world's biggest fans of your favorite franchises. From breaking news and exclusives, never-before-seen looks at movies and games, to reviews, let's plays, and live streams, IGN brings you all the coverage you need, no matter where you are. Whether you're on IGN.com, the IGN app, YouTube, Facebook, or Snapchat, we've always got you covered. IGN, the #1 source for all games and entertainment fans worldwide. Welcome back to IGN Live at E3. If you're looking for exclusives, hands-on demos, and first looks, you're in the right place. IGN.com and Disney XD. Be sure to tag us on Twitter at IGN and use the hashtag E32018 and weigh in on what you think should be in the running for the best game of the show. We'll announce the winner this Thursday on IGN.com. While you're at it, don't forget to download the IGN app for all the latest news, and sit tight because we've got live coverage of all the major events out of E3. Today, the PlayStation Showcase, and tomorrow, Nintendo and the Fortnite Celebrity 50v50 Pro-Am. In just a little bit, we'll finally be getting an exclusive look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and later we've got Shadow of the Tomb Raider. But right now, let's take an exclusive look behind the scenes with the development team of The Division 2.
The amazing thing about working on The Division 1 and the live game for The Division 1 was that we have 2 years of learnings of how people enjoy playing the game, what people enjoy the most about it. And we know that Endgame is where the core, the meat of the experience lies. So we went into The Division 2 not with a multiplayer first attitude, because that's a given. We went in with an endgame first. There's so many things that we wanted to explore in The Division 2 in terms of your relationship with the enemy and your relationship with combat. So the first thing I want to speak to is you know, this impression of bullet sponginess. You have a photorealistic, credible world, and yet there are enemies that can take 700 hits to the head. It kind of broke the immersion. For The Division 2, what we wanted to do is to challenge that, is to make the combat much more intuitive.
Getting that topography of kill times, like taking down red bars, super snappy. We're closer to a pure shooter experience.
It feels so much snappier. The enemies go down faster. The time to kill has been cut way down.
All the way up to big hulking, tough targets where we apply this new feature of destructible armor.
If an enemy is armored, you can see that armor and you can see bullets chipping it away.
We've seen in the first game as well that it's very important when you create a party with your friends that you need to have different types of skills. So you have a sniper, you have an assault. So we wanted to push even further all that.
In The Division 2, you're going to be able very, very quickly to group up with people and to find different roles to play. That just gets better when we consider specializations. And specializations are something that we unlock when you reach your level cap, that start off with a signature weapon.
Signature weapons, it's an expression of power.
It's a third category of weapon that sits on top of your skills. If I had to pick a favorite myself for the 3 signature weapons we're showing at E3, which is the crossbow platform, the heavy 50 cal sniper rifle, and the grenade launcher, I would have to go for a grenade launcher. The Division 2 is very much an experience where the more you play, the more there is to do, in a way. So when you get to Endgame, the world is at its most alive. The challenges that you can take on are the biggest ones, if you choose to.
Raids for us is the ultimate challenge. We want you to be able to play with your friends and create synergies.
Of course, we're going to make sure that there are, you know, moments you'll never forget, unique to the raids. I think in terms of spectacle, we built so much more spectacle into fights in general, in the game as a whole. And you'll see when you play the game, just triggering a weak point with one of your skills, exploding into another one, triggering that, and creating this chain reactions is incredibly satisfying.
We started thinking, okay, it's 7 months later. It's 7 months after the events of The Division 1. It's not winter anymore. Society is starting to rebuild.
The thing that's exciting about DC is that it's the center of American democracy. It's the center of power and of government. Basically everything the Division is supposed to be supporting, but all of that's sort of been swept away by this crisis.
If you want to make money, you're going to go to New York. If you want to have power, you're going to go to DC. It's a very iconic city. There are plenty of landmarks.
If New York was really two different sort of biomes, commercial and residential, Washington, D.C. is 6 or 7 of those, including, for the first time in a Division game, a nature biome.
This time around you've got these lush open parks which are now overgrown. We're also seeing kind of this flooding zone that's come into the post-pandemic areas and really changing DC in a unique way.
The original idea for the character in Division 2 is that you're a new sheriff in town, that you're arriving in a situation that you aren't familiar with.
Having somebody come into Washington, D.C. and be stripped of his weapons, to have the bare minimum for survival, and yet every step of the way gaining more equipment, more skills, more armor, more gear.
The gear game and the progression of the gear in the game is of course really at the heart of the progression experience. So it's not just about the gear growing in power, it's also about enabling new ways to play and how it synergizes with the different parts of the rest of your kit.
This is promising.
Now, in terms of how your character looks, one of the things that was important for me was to see the evolution between a level 1 character and a level 30 character. Again, something we didn't particularly do well in the Division 1.
One thing that was key for us was to really work on making sure that every character looked unique. So in the Division 2 we have exotic sets of gear that goes together in one design. So if you collect all the different pieces, you will get a certain look, and those looks will be very different from the gear that you receive from normal leveling.
This is sick.
The Dark Zone is iconic for the Division. And of course we're going to bring it back. And we're going to bring it back with 2 years of experimentations on the Division 1. One of the things that we realized on the Division 1 is that we were incredibly proud of Underground, we were incredibly proud of Last Stand and Survival, but they were behind a paywall.
That's true.
And they kind of split the community. So taking that lesson on board, what we want to do for the Division 2 is to supply all of that content for free. So what we're planning is 3 different content drops every 3 months, new modes, new story missions, and new areas to explore.
New areas.
The Division 2 will be available in March 2019.
Oh my god. Thank you, guys.
From Ubisoft comes one of the most anticipated games of E3. Let's welcome IGN's James Duggan and Julian Garrity from Ubisoft to help us check out our exclusive look at Tom Clancy's Division 2. You just came off the live stage.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
Super good, a little bit drained,
Just a little.
but pumped for the rest of the show.
Yeah, so how has the fan reception to the Division 2 been so far?
It's been really, really positive. When I was on stage there and hearing the sort of warmth towards the developers, towards what we were showing, waves of love. I mean, it was super natural, very tense before going up on stage, but very, very natural afterwards. It was a fantastic experience. I'd do it again. I had a little tear coming off the stage.
Aww. Well, thank you for coming straight to us afterwards.
Yeah, so you ran here. You flew straight in. Can you speak about the philosophy for the Division 2, what the most important pillars to really nail are in terms of design for the sequel?
I think, speaking to that, you know, we have 2 years of live, and taking those live lessons from the first game and applying them to things that we wanted to see. So one of the basic building blocks of the game is, of course, shooting. And we all wanted that to be much more intuitive, which means faster kill times for you, faster kill times for the enemies, weak points everywhere, better animations, better reactions from the enemies. So that basic 30-second building block, it feels so much more like a shooter. And that's something that we were super passionate about. One of the other things is endgame had to be our priority. So we went into it with an endgame first sort of attitude. And that's, you know, things that we can't really talk about now, but things like specializations. which are a whole new progression once you get to endgame. Once you reach your max level, end of the campaign, bam, specializations, you choose a signature weapon, and that signature weapon, it opens up a whole progression path for you.
It's something that you guys did talk about a little bit today, but I did want to kind of follow up, is how different is a level 1 player going to look and feel to a level 30 player?
I love that, because New York, in a snowstorm, you only have a certain limited amount of looks that you can
Lots of parkas.
Yeah, lots of parkas, lots of woolly hats. Summer, Washington, D.C., it really allowed us to stretch what we could do. And that's not just in terms of vanity. We also wanted a level 1 character to look radically different from a level 30 character. And it doesn't necessarily have to be bigger, bulkier, heavier. It could be lithe, but much more equipped. So those two things, super important first.
So one of the things you spoke about was specializations, and this is really interesting to me because the signature abilities of the Division 1 didn't really evoke a sense of a role, but a giant 50 cal sniper or grenade launcher I think does in a certain way and pushes you in this archetypal direction. Is the endgame content going to require a certain makeup? Will certain groups that have different archetypes be more beneficial than 3 people rolling the 50 cal sniper? Are you designing for that?
So the first thing is that the end game isn't only for hardcore players. We wanted to make content for everyone, and that's part of the philosophy. And that's, you know, one of the things I can't go into too much detail about, but there's a narrative and a gameplay hook that's going to bring all of our players, single players, co-op players, the most hardcore, into that end game experience. Will you need to master the specialization and the synchronicity between you and other players? For certain endgame activities, absolutely. And, you know, the raid that we announced today on the USO stage, that's definitely going to be one of them. Because that is the ultimate endgame challenge, right? Being able to complete that, I think you're going to need a well-balanced team there.
Well, let's talk about that. What can we expect from raids?
I can't say anything more than that. I can say that I think we're going to release it within the 2-3 weeks after launch.
Oh, cool.
To give people time to get to endgame, so it builds up a this desire to jump in and do something really, really huge. But it's in an iconic location in Washington. It's going to be good.
I wonder. You have said that there are 8 players in it. That's really exciting. Another endgame activity in the Division 1 that I loved, my favorite part of the Division 1 was the Dark Zone. It was kind of this Ultima Online, almost EVE Online-esque take on PvP from a AAA developer. So it was something new. You go into this space, and anything you pick up, you have the potential to lose. Is the Dark Zone coming to the Division 2, and what improvements or ideologies are you applying to it?
No, I'm not allowed to. No, I'm not allowed to talk about it. The Dark Zone for me is iconic for the Division. So, although I am not allowed to talk about it, I wouldn't be surprised if it peeked its nose out. And again, you know, we have so many learnings from the first game, things that people really enjoyed, things that clicked with people. It's going to be a much better experience.
Well, let me ask you this. The Dark Zone, as it exists today in the Division, is nowhere near where it was at the beginning. So what changes have you made thus far to the Dark Zone in the Division 1?
So, you know, I mean, huge thanks to the team at Redstorm that have been looking after this, curating this. And one of the things they wanted to do was not to make you going rogue something that could be accidental. So that is something that we delivered recently, where you have to choose to go rogue. So that's a big change, and it creates a more level playing field for sure. But I've got to be honest, what we're trying to do here, which is a PvE game that you can play by yourself or in a team, PvE focused game, balancing for multiplayer and PvP, it's not an easy thing. But we genuinely believe that it adds to that richness, that it adds to that buffet of activities that we want to propose to players.
So one thing that I wanted to ask, but just really quickly, I don't know how much you can talk about it, is incursions.
Yes.
What can we expect there?
So incursions, I think, are going to be replaced by raids.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm sure people will be really excited to see what that means. That's probably
8 players. This is so exciting.
It's probably the main thing I've seen people talking about on Twitter. So.
But we do have a little surprise with main missions, but I can't go into it.
You keep saying that.
I know. I'm sorry.
Well, we've got
It's
to
our
take...
first day talking about it.
We must know everything immediately. No, we've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, more Division 2, and after that, we're heading to ancient Greece for an exclusive look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Odyssey. Oh, this is good.
Before you find IGN's awesome content anywhere else online, you'll find it right at home on IGN.com. With IGN First, you'll get a sneak peek at never-before-seen gameplay, exclusive insights from developers, and a whole lot more. NVC Live brings you IGN's Nintendo podcast up close and personal. Engage with other viewers, ask our NVC hosts your burning questions, and become a part of the show. Don't miss out. Find everything first on IGN.com.
If you're not following IGN on social media, what are you waiting for?
What do you think, guys, about Division 2?
We're bringing the memes,
If you played Division 1, what's your feedback about
custom
Division
original
2
content,
so far?
the best user-generated videos and art, and a whole lot more. Be part of the conversation throughout the year. Follow IGN on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The IGN app is the best way to stay up to the minute on what you love. No matter what you play, create the custom feed and filter what you want to watch. Live streams have never been easier to find. With the floating video player on iOS, you can keep watching the live stream as you read other news. World premiere trailers, and the biggest games. Download the IGN app from the iOS or Android stores now. Sign up for notifications and we'll alert you the second news breaks. Not only is IGN the world's biggest media brand for games and entertainment, but we also have a team of some of the world's biggest fans of your favorite franchises. From breaking news and exclusives, never-before-seen looks at movies and games, to reviews, let's plays, and live streams, IGN brings you all the coverage you need no matter where you are. Whether you're on IGN.com, the IGN app, YouTube, Facebook, or Snapchat, we've always got you covered. IGN, the #1 source for all games and entertainment fans worldwide.
Come on. Short breaks.
Welcome back to IGN Live at E3 2018. We've got a look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey in a few, and later the team behind For Honor is stopping by. But first, let's dig a little deeper into The Division 2. I wanted to talk about the setting. Where is it set? Well, people probably figured that out, but can you talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're set in Alaska. No, I'm kidding. It's
wow, it really didn't look like that.
Washington, D.C., 7 months after the virus spread. It's hot, it's flooded, it's been completely transformed. And that's something that we spent a lot of time trying to get right.
So let's talk about that transformation. One thing, I visited Sweden, spoke with some developers on the massive team, an absolute treasure. And I have to say that Adam really impressed me with his design about the functionality of spaces and how he thinks about that when he's transforming them into this kind of post-pandemic setting. Can you speak about that a bit?
So I think even this started when we were working on the Division 1, the first game. Every single space that we have, it comes from a real-world location. And that architecture in a real-world location serves a purpose. So a stadium is designed completely differently from a library, a school, a police station. So once you have that sort of function, that's great. You need to design the building around that function, architectural principles. And then, of course, we add our layer of our fiction on it. What happened to this space during the pandemic? During the collapse. Maybe it became an aid distribution center. Perfect. Maybe it became an armory for the JTF. Great. But then you have to add another layer of information, which is how is it being used today? How is it being used with these enemy factions running around the city, transforming those locations too? So every single building that we have in the game, every single interior or exterior, we go through it 2-3 layers minimum.
How long does that process take? I mean, it kind of sounds fun, but it also sounds very difficult.
It takes a long time. We did a huge amount of research trips to Washington, D.C., and we talked to a lot of great people who would, you know, tell us, okay,
The key
if
mapping
there
is
was a
amazing.
pandemic, if there was a crisis like this, what would happen? What would happen to the big central stadium in the city? What would happen to the police stations, the fire stations? What would happen to the governmental buildings, the museums? And we use that to be able to transform.
So you talked to literal like pandemic experts,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
That's really cool.
It's really exciting research. So you have that narrative environmental storytelling, which I think is really cool. But let's talk about how Washington affects gameplay compared to the Division 1. You said the Division 1 had 2 biomes and Washington has 6 or 7.
Yep.
What does that mean for gameplay?
So it's a great question, because what we were trying to do with Washington, D.C. is to inject as much variety, not just in the environments, but also in the gameplay. So you can kind of figure it out that a commercial district plays completely differently because of the shops, the parking spaces, the parked cars, compared to the mall. Wide open spaces. And that sort of change really makes you think about your loadout, your equipment, the tools that you're going to be using to accomplish a certain objective. So, you know, we have a nature biome for the first time. Even that is going to transform the way that you take cover.
And that's not the only thing that has changed from the Division 1. We also have new factions, correct? You're showing off the True Sons.
Yes.
They're very militant. What is their whole deal, and what's up with that foam cannon?
The foam cannon is based on riot foam. So
Really? See, that's a real thing.
Yeah, that's
that
a
is
real thing.
terrifying.
It's anti-riot units will use riot foam now.
Look
So
at the juice
that is not.
outtakes.
It's
Oh
not
my
us
God.
being crazy futuristic. This is
So
something that's used
realistic.
today.
I'm now living in a darker world.
Yes. Yes.
Now you know.
So what are the True Sons motto? Like,
Oh,
what's their
so-
MO?
For me, the True Sons are those bullies
Oh.
that used to push you around. These are the bad apples in any bunch of people. They're equipped. They want to prey on the weak. They want to crush people. They want to rule the country their way, with their ideology. Tyranny at its absolute best, if you will. So, obviously, the Division has to stop that. And that's, you know, going to be, hey, it's just one of the factions, but it's going to be a big challenge to rid the city of them.
I did want to ask, in terms of story, this is a thing that I care about a fair bit. How strong are the characters going to be? Is the protagonist going to be voiced this time around? Like, what are we getting in terms of story?
So the story follows the same sort of model that we had on the Division 1, but we've learned how to do things better as well. It's very difficult when we're creating an open world that's non-linear, co-op focused, to be able to tell a story in the same way that a linear corridor-like game is going to tell a story. I'm attached to it, so I think that we have something that's super compelling and really asks you these questions of this city, Washington, D.C. How on earth could we have lost it?
What's really interesting is what we're seeing right now, this downed Air Force One. This looks like what would be an incursion in the first game, but this is actually an open world space, correct?
Yes.
Explain to me what we're going to find in the open world that we didn't find in the first game and how you make it a more engaging space.
I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do was to inject a sense that humanity had a chance to rebuild. And that's reflected in the civilians, civilian patrols, and settlements. And there are several settlements in the city. You need to find them, understand what they need, and help them get off their knees, basically. And of course, these civilians will go out into the open world and look for resources. Here, we have a control point. Now, the ownership of the control points by the factions or the civilians is going to be essential to ensure that resources are transferred to the settlements. So this is literally just one of those systemic activities that you can run across. It's not a main mission, it's not a side mission. It really is just one of those control points.
Are things still structured in that way of main missions, side missions, boss fights?
We've changed a little bit of things, but yes, mainly it's going to be an open world that's much more living thanks to these patrols and different factions and the civilians being injected into the mix. But on top of that, you have bounties, main missions, side missions, different activities, much richer than the first game.
So obviously the Division is a shared world shooter and other people are super important, your team is super important, your friends are super important. What are you doing in terms of the social architecture to facilitate people playing together and maybe building out their group of friends and players?
So, clans are going to be a thing, and one of the things that I believe in is making a system for clans that's the most accessible yet, either on console or PC. So we want to get you playing with other people, because for me, playing together in the Division really makes the game shine.
Do you think there will still be something for people who want to play solo?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not the most hardcore gamer out there. I play. I have a young daughter. I play in the mornings because I don't want her to see the violence and stuff like that. None of my friends are awake at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's a game for me too. And I know that single player sort of feel is super important.
I played a lot of the first Division single player and had a great time doing that. So.
I played the whole thing single player. I played it again and again and again, of course, in multiplayer, but the single player experience has to be powerful too.
Glad to hear that.
That's true.
So let's go back to the combat very briefly. One of the biggest complaints, I suppose, from the Division 1 was this idea of bullet sponge. Which, for those who are uninitiated, you shoot an enemy that doesn't visually look like you should be able to take a lot of hits, or is not an alien or a giant mech or something like that, and he doesn't die. He takes 30, 40 rounds, 50 rounds to bring down. What are you doing to address that concern in the Division 2?
That's something we touched upon earlier, but this intuition in terms of combat is super important to us. So we've reduced kill times, not only for the enemies, but also for you. So the enemies are more lethal as well, so you have to be much more careful.
Sorry, one quick, I assume there's still difficulty options, all right?
Difficulty options on the main missions.
Okay.
On the open world, since we're looking at the control point, you're not tweaking the difficulty level. But those enemies will also scale for you.
Whoa.
So weak points,
what an open world
huge ingredient to make that precision shooting that much more important. Animations have been improved to show these hit reactions. The heavies have armor that you can chip and blow off, which we demonstrated too. There are a lot of things that combine to make an experience that feels much more reactive, much more intuitive, and much closer to being a pure shooter.
I did actually want to ask about enemy variety. How much is there?
There's a lot, because we worked on several factions, but within those factions, the archetypes for the different enemies are wider as well than the first game. Where here, you know, when you're going to be fighting the True Sons, it's going to feel like the True Sons. When you're going to be fighting some of the other factions, it's going to feel very different too.
What are you trying to do in terms of loot to make the loot more interesting, and maybe speak to the player who hasn't played the Division since launch, just to make that loot really exciting in this photorealistic world?
I think loot is something that is absolutely key, of course, because it's that main progression driver. And making sure that the loot that you get has a little something that's really going to push you to, okay, let's go out there, let's try and get some more enemies under my belt and see what drops too. So, you know, we've got the gear, we've got the weapons. The gear now has brands and brand sets that if you complete, you get bonuses, that type of thing. So
new sets.
It all in all, it's a much deeper loot game than the first game.
Really weird question for you right now. I know the first game had dogs.
Yes.
It looks like there's a lot more animals this time around. Can you loot them as well?
No.
Okay, I didn't think that would be likely if I wanted to.
I honestly, we wanted to put this howl of pain for the dogs to discourage.
I never shot the dogs. I was so against shooting dogs.
It's for me, it's one of those ingredients that you see in the world and it becomes real, right? If you go to Washington, D.C., you see squirrels everywhere. So we're going to have squirrels. IGN exclusive.
Wow. Breaking news, everyone. There are squirrels confirmed for the Division 2. All right, we're almost at the end of the segment, but I just wanted to ask, what are you most excited about, or what's your favorite thing about the Division 2?
That's a great question. I think, for me, the fact that we're building a game that's going to launch with a whole year worth of free post-launch content. So we're not splitting the community. We're committing ourselves to keeping everybody on board for as long as possible.
Very nice of you, and great job on the presentation today. The whole conference was a lot of fun, so it was really great seeing you there. We've got to take a break now, but we've got an exclusive look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey coming up, and then later, the PlayStation Showcase.
The Assassin's Creed Odyssey is gonna be amazing. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching.
Bye.